Dr. Ilara Voss stood in the observation chamber of the United Earth Alliance's orbital research station, her dark eyes scanning the digital projections shimmering before her. Strings of incomprehensible data flowed across the transparent display, pulsing like veins with an otherworldly rhythm. The enigmatic signal had been discovered only days ago, and already it had turned the scientific community upside down. "It's like a symphony," Ilara muttered to herself, leaning closer to the holographic waveform. Her voice betrayed a mix of awe and apprehension. Each undulating note seemed to carry a weight, an intent, as if the signal wasn't just a random anomaly, but a carefully composed message. Behind her, Commander Julian Astor crossed his arms, his military posture contrasting sharply with the casual disarray of scientists bustling around the lab. "Symphony or not, Doctor, it's caused every quantum eye we have to short-circuit. Entire cities on Earth lost power grids for hours because of this song." Ilara turned to face him, brushing a stray strand of auburn hair from her face. "And that's exactly why we can't ignore it. Whatever this is, it's interacting with our systems in ways we don't understand. It's intelligent. Alive, perhaps." The commander sighed. "Alive signals don't crash entire continents' worth of infrastructure. That's hostile behavior in my book." Before Ilara could respond, an alert blared across the chamber. The display shifted, and the signal's intricate patterns began to change, becoming more frantic, almost like a heartbeat. The lab fell silent as everyone stared at the screen. "What's it doing now?" A junior technician's voice trembled. Ilara narrowed her eyes. "It's evolving." She reached out to adjust the interface, isolating a fragment of the waveform. "It's responding to us. Every time we analyze it, it shifts, like it's adapting to how we're looking at it." "That doesn't make any sense," another scientist murmured. "How can a signal know we're observing it?" Commander Astor stepped forward, his hand instinctively resting on the sidearm holstered at his hip. "Doctor, if this is some kind of trap—" "It's not," Ilara cut him off, her voice firm. "At least, not in the way you're thinking. Look at this." She expanded a section of the waveform, revealing what appeared to be a complex sequence of mathematical equations interwoven with fractal-like patterns. "This isn't random noise. This is a language, a sophisticated one." The room buzzed with murmurs of disbelief. Ilara continued, her excitement mounting. "And it's not just any language. These structures, they resemble some of the oldest proto-linguistic symbols on Earth. This signal isn't just speaking, it's speaking to us." Her words hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. Before anyone could respond, the lights in the station flickered. The cold, metallic hum filled the room as every screen abruptly went dark, save for the one displaying the signal. Its glowing patterns seemed to swell, filling the chamber with an almost hypnotic pulse. A synthesized voice suddenly reverberated through the station's comm system. "Coordinates transmitted. Seek us if you dare." The Aegis Eternum emerged from the swirling void of its final warp jump, its sleek, obsidian hull glinting in the light of an unfamiliar star. Around it lay a chaotic expanse of shattered asteroids and derelict ships, an ancient graveyard frozen in the silence of space. Dr. Ilara Voss stood at the observation deck, staring wide-eyed at the enormous structure ahead. The eternal gate loomed like a monolithic sentinel, its surface a labyrinth of glowing glyphs and fractal designs that seemed to shift and ripple under scrutiny. The gate radiated a faint golden energy, its center a swirling vortex of light that pulsed with eerie rhythm. "It's beautiful," Ilara whispered, her breath fogging the glass. Commander Julian Astor joined her, his face grim as he scanned the chaotic scene beyond. "Beautiful, maybe, but this isn't a welcome mat, Doctor. It's a grave warning." He gestured at the field of wreckage. "Every one of those ships came here looking for answers, and none of them made it back." Ilara turned to him, her gaze steely. "We're not them. We're prepared." Astor snorted. "Prepared? For what?" A structure that speaks in riddles and kills anything that gets close? You don't know what's waiting for us. Neither do you. Ilara turned back to the gate, her voice quiet but firm. But humanity has been staring at the stars for centuries, wondering if we're alone. This is our chance to finally know the truth. Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp chime from the ship's AI Artemis. The cool, synthetic voice filled the deck. Attention, all personnel. The Eternal Gate is emitting a directed energy signal. Analyzing. Analysis complete. The signal is harmless but contains a complex mathematical sequence. Awaiting instructions. Ilara straightened. Artemis, decode and overlay the signal patterns onto the gate's glyphs. As the display flickered to life, the glyphs on the screen lit up in perfect synchronization with the gate's pulsing energy. The patterns matched seamlessly, forming a map-like structure that spiraled inward to a single glowing point at the heart of the gate. "It's a key," Ilara murmured, "or a guide. Whatever this is, it's meant to lead us somewhere." Commander Astor frowned. "Or it's bait." Before either could argue further, the ship shuddered violently. The alarms blared and red lights bathed the deck in an ominous glow. "Status report." Astor barked, gripping the railing as the ship rocked again. "Commander," Artemis responded, "multiple unidentified objects are inbound. Scans indicate automated drones of unknown origin. Weapon systems have been activated." The viewport filled with dark, angular shapes emerging from the debris field. The drones moved with terrifying precision, their metallic surfaces shimmering with the same golden energy as the gate. "Guess they don't want us knocking on the door," Astor muttered, drawing his sidearm out of reflex. Ilara's voice cut through the chaos. "Wait, we might be able to disable them. The gate reacted to our presence, and so did they. There's a connection." "Whatever you're thinking, think faster." Astor snapped as the drones charged, their weapons glowing with lethal intent. The Aegis Eternum shuddered under the first volley from the drones. Plasma bursts sizzled through the void, narrowly missing the ship's hull as the crew scrambled into action. Commander Julian Astor's voice boomed over the comm system. "All hands to battle stations. Shields at maximum. Artemis, plot evasive maneuvers." "Acknowledged," the ship's AI responded, its tone eerily calm as the Aegis Eternum veered sharply, dodging another salvo. In the command center, Dr. Ilara Voss frantically analyzed the data flooding her console. The drones, sleek and angular with energy cores pulsating in time with the Eternal Gate, moved with unnerving precision. There had to be a way to disable them without risking the mission or their lives. "Ilara," Astor called, his voice clipped, "unless you've got a way to talk these things down, we're going to have to shoot our way out." "I'm working on it," she snapped, her fingers flying across the controls. The drone's energy signatures match the gate's emissions. They're not just guarding it, they're an extension of it. "Fantastic," Astor growled. "So we're fighting the gate itself." "No," Ilara said, a spark of realization lighting her eyes. "We don't need to fight them. We need to speak their language." "What are you talking about?" Ilara's mind raced as she pieced together the fragments of the gate's glyphic code. The signal the gate had sent earlier wasn't just a mathematical sequence, it was a command protocol. If she could decipher it, she might be able to override the drone's programming. "Artemis, overlay the glyphic data with the drone's energy patterns," she ordered. "Cross-reference with the gate's initial signal and run a simulation for a command pulse." "Processing," Artemis replied. Another explosion rocked the ship, and sparks rained down from the overhead panels. Astor grabbed a nearby console to steady himself. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster." Ilara barely heard him. The pieces were falling into place. The gate's language wasn't just a language. It was a bridge between technology and biology, an interface designed for communication with advanced intelligences. "I've got it," she shouted. "Artemis, transmit the pulse directly to the drone's energy cores." Pulse transmitted. Artemis confirmed. For a moment, nothing happened. The drones continued their relentless assault, their glowing cores flaring brighter as they charged another attack. Then, one by one, the drones faltered. Their movements became erratic, their weapons powering down as they drifted aimlessly in space. "They're stopping," Aster said, disbelief in his voice. "You did it." Ilara exhaled shakily. "I didn't stop them. I told them we're not a threat." The drones suddenly reversed course, retreating toward the gate and forming a protective orbit around it. The silence that followed was deafening. "Ilara," Aster said, his tone softer now, "whatever just happened, you bought us time. But we're still standing in front of the biggest mystery in human history." "What now?" Ilara stared at the swirling vortex within the gate, its golden light casting long shadows across the command center. Her voice was steady as she replied, "Now we step through." The calm after the storm was unsettling. The drones had retreated, but their ominous presence still hung over the crew like a dark cloud. The Aegis Aeternum remained anchored in space, facing the eternal gate, which pulsed with an almost sentient energy. Despite the sudden ceasefire, the crew was tense, aware that their journey had only just begun. Dr. Ilara Voss paced the command deck, her eyes never leaving the swirling vortex within the gate. The ancient structure had yet to reveal its full secret, but something deep within its heart was calling to her, to humanity. "Artemis," she called, "scan the gate for any additional signs of activity. Look for any changes in energy readings, especially fluctuations that could suggest an incoming threat." "Acknowledged," Artemis replied coolly, "scanning now." As the ship's sensors probed the ancient structure, Ilara turned to Commander Julian Aster. He was standing with his arms crossed, watching her with a mixture of caution and curiosity. The tension between them was palpable, but Ilara knew he was as driven as she was. He wouldn't back down from this discovery, even if it meant facing the unknown. "Do you think we've done enough?" Aster asked, his voice low. The drones stopped yes. "But there's something wrong about all this. It's too quiet." Ilara met his gaze with quiet determination. "We've only just scratched the surface. Whatever this gate is, it's more than just a relic. It's a test." At that, the gate shuddered, and the ship's warning systems lit up again. A voice, soft, almost a whisper, resonated through the ship's comms. "Humanity, you have passed the first trial." The crew froze. The voice wasn't like the automated drones. It was alive, imbued with a strange weight and presence. It felt almost like a living being was speaking directly into their minds. "Ilara," Aster's voice was laced with disbelief. "What does that mean?" Before she could respond, the gate flared brightly, casting a warm, golden light across the ship. The swirling vortex in its center expanded, forming a doorway, a shimmering portal that pulsed with an almost tangible energy. For a moment, it felt as if the entire universe was holding its breath. Then the voice continued. "Humanity must face the 3 trials to prove its worth. The first trial, survival, has already begun. Will you face what lies beyond the door, or will you turn away?" Aster's hand rested on the control panel. "What the hell is that supposed to mean? A test? A trial? This isn't a game, Ilara." Ilara swallowed, her thoughts racing. "This isn't just about us, Julian. It's about everything. The gate, it's not just testing us. It's testing humanity. It's asking if we're ready to join the larger universe, or if we're still too primitive to survive on a galactic scale." The voice echoed again, its tone more commanding now. "Survival begins with the first step. Cross the threshold, and the trial will begin in earnest." Without warning, the ship's gravity field flickered and distorted. The crew staggered as the entire station seemed to shift, the space around them warping. The portal within the gate surged, pulling them toward it. "Ilara," Aster shouted, grabbing her arm. "What the hell is happening?" But it was already too late. The crew was swept toward the portal as if by an invisible hand. The ship's control systems failed to respond, and for a moment, Ilara's heart stopped as she was flung through the ethereal doorway, followed by Aster and the rest of the crew. And then, everything went dark. When Ilara regained consciousness, the first thing she noticed was the oppressive silence. The hum of the Aegis Aeternum was gone. The steady pulse of the gate had faded, leaving nothing but a vast, eerie stillness. She lay on the cold, alien ground, her head spinning, struggling to piece together what had just happened. The landscape before her was nothing like anything she had ever seen. Stretching plains of shimmering crystal, jagged rock formations that seemed to reach for the sky like petrified claws, and a sky filled with swirling colors that no human eyes had ever witnessed. It was as if they had crossed into another dimension, or perhaps another time altogether. Ilara, Commander Aster's voice echoed from somewhere nearby, cutting through the disorienting silence. "Report in now." "Here," Ilara replied, her voice hoarse. She pushed herself to her feet, wincing at the unfamiliar gravity pulling at her limbs. The air was thick with the scent of something metallic, like the inside of an old machine. She turned, spotting Aster and the rest of the crew emerging from the shimmering portal. They looked as disoriented as she felt, their faces pale and drawn. "We're not in Kansas anymore," Aster muttered under his breath, scanning their surroundings with wide eyes. Ilara took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. The gate had transported them here, wherever here was, but she could feel its presence in the air, a faint hum, like a heartbeat beneath the surface of the ground. It was the same golden energy that had surrounded the gate, and it seemed to pulse with an urgency now. The gate was still here, waiting for them to make the next move. "Where are we?" one of the engineers asked, voice trembling. "I don't know," Ilara admitted, "but this is the second trial. The first one was survival. We're alive, which means we've passed it. Now we need to find the others who've come before us, if we can." Aster raised an eyebrow. "Others? Yes, this place, it's a graveyard. I don't think we're the first to try to unlock the gate's secrets." She turned, her eyes skating the horizon. "We need to find the archives. Whatever knowledge this place holds, it's our only chance to understand why the Voidkin were wiped out and how we can stop them from returning." Before anyone could respond, a soft, eerie sound echoed across the landscape, like the mournful cry of a dying star. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, but the others were already moving, instinctively reaching for their weapons. The air seemed to vibrate with tension. From the distance, a dark shape emerged, a massive vessel, like the husk of a long-dead ship, floating ominously in the alien sky. Its surface was battered, worn by time, yet it still emanated an unmistakable aura of power. Could it be? Aster's voice was filled with disbelief. A ship? A relic of the civilization that built the gate? "It's not a ship," Ilara said, her pulse quickening. "It's something much older, something that was left behind. We need to get closer." As the crew began to move toward the vessel, the air grew colder, and a deep, resonant hum filled the space. It was the sound of something ancient, something that had been dormant for millennia, now stirring to life. And then, as they approached the wreckage, a voice, ancient and cold, boomed from the ship's hull. "Turn back. The Voidkin are coming. You cannot stop what has already been set in motion." The crew froze. Their journey had just begun, but already it seemed as if their greatest enemy was not just the Voidkin, but something far older, far more terrifying. The voice from the ship's hull echoed through the alien landscape, its words like a death knell. Ilara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the environment, a creeping dread spreading through her chest. The crew tensed, weapons drawn, but no one moved. There was something unnervingly familiar about the warning. "The Voidkin," Ilara whispered, her voice trembling. "It's not a legend. They were real. They're here." Commander Aster stepped forward, his eyes scanning the darkened ship. "Who are you? What do you mean by turn back?" He shouted into the stillness, but there was no response. The ship, the ancient husk, loomed before them, silent once more. The hum beneath their feet intensified, vibrating the very ground they stood on. Ilara took a step toward the wreckage, her instincts screaming at her to turn round, to leave, but she couldn't. This was it. This was the heart of the mystery they had come to solve, and despite the warnings, they had to face it. Ilara, Aster said quietly, his voice suddenly full of concern. We don't know what's inside that thing. For all we know, it's a trap. I know, she replied, her tone steady despite the rising fear, but we've already crossed the threshold. Whatever it takes, we need to understand what happened to this place, to the civilization that built the gate. She turned back to the rest of the crew, her voice resolute. Stay close, we'll explore it together, and if there's anything hostile in there, we'll deal with it. Aster nodded, though his expression was filled with doubt. If anything comes at us, I'm not waiting around to have a conversation. We're leaving if we can't handle it. As they approached the ship, a faint glow began to pulse from within its hull. It wasn't just light, it was an energy, ancient and unstable, crackling with power. The crew stepped cautiously through the threshold, weapons raised, but they found nothing but cold, abandoned hallways, empty, save for the occasional faded glyph on the walls, symbols Ilara couldn't yet understand. This place, it feels wrong, one of the engineers murmured, her voice shaking. Like it's alive, but not in the way we are. It's almost watching us. We're not alone, Ilara said quietly, the words almost a prophecy. Her eyes flicked to the far end of the corridor, where the shadows seemed to twist unnaturally. Something's here. The ship's internal lights flickered to life with a sudden hum, revealing more of the eerie, lifeless chambers. Their path led them deeper into the ship, to a central chamber where a massive control console stood, encased in the same golden energy that surrounded the gate. It pulsed, just as the gate had done, in a rhythmic pattern. Without thinking, Ilara stepped forward, her fingers reaching for the console's interface. The moment her skin made contact with the surface, a violent tremor shook the ship. The entire chamber lit up with blinding light, and a new voice, different from the one that had warned them, boomed in their minds, shaking them to their core. You have trespassed where you should not have, it intoned. Now you will learn the price of defiance. A scream echoed through the halls, but it wasn't from the crew. It came from somewhere deep within the ship, alive. Suddenly, the shadows in the room began to move, coalescing into monstrous forms, their bodies a mass of shifting darkness and glowing eyes. Ilara's blood ran cold as the Voidkin emerged from the blackness, their terrifying shapes filling the chamber. And then, in the blink of an eye, they were upon them. The Voidkin moved with blinding speed, their bodies shifting and writhing as if made of pure darkness. Their eyes, glowing with an unnatural light, fixed on the crew, their intent clear. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest as she instinctively stepped back, her mind racing. These were the creatures from legend, ancient, terrifying, and utterly merciless. Get back, Aster shouted, drawing his weapon and firing a burst of energy toward the nearest Voidkin. The shot passed through the creature without slowing it down, as if it were made of smoke. The Voidkin merely tilted its head, its eerie, glowing eyes narrowing. The crew scrambled to react, but the Voidkin were everywhere. They moved through the air, floating, shifting, their forms like shadows that distorted and reformed with each blink of an eye. One of the crew members screamed as a Voidkin reached out with a shadowy tendril, wrapping it around her throat. She struggled, her hands clawing at the darkness, but it only tightened. Her body began to twist and convulse, her screams choked off as the darkness consumed her. Ilara, Aster roared, his voice filled with panic as he turned toward her. We need to get out of here, now. But Ilara's mind was elsewhere. She could see it, the golden energy from the console, still pulsing, still calling to her. She knew that somehow it was connected to the Voidkin. That console, this ship, it wasn't just a relic, it was a prison. The Voidkin had been trapped here, sealed away by the ancient civilization that built the gate, and now they were free. The ship trembled again, and Ilara's eyes widened. The Voidkin weren't just attacking, they were tearing the ship apart from the inside. We have to shut them down. Ilara shouted over the chaos, her voice urgent. The console, it's the key. If we can control it, we might be able to stop them. Aster was already running toward her, his gun drawn and firing as he moved. Don't just stand there, do something. But Ilara didn't need to be told. Her mind was working quickly, her fingers already finding the control interface on the console. As her hands made contact, the pulsing golden light grew brighter, and the ship responded. The Voidkin hissed, recoiling as if in pain, but they didn't stop their assault. Ilara, no, Aster yelled, but she was already connected to the console, the energy surging through her, flooding her senses. She saw it then, a vision, a flash of memories that didn't belong to her. Ancient beings, long gone, had once created the gate and the ship. They had sealed away the Voidkin, locking them in a dimension beyond reach. But the gate had been broken, and the creatures were free to roam again. Ilara, pull back! Aster shouted again, his voice cutting through the confusion, but the images were too vivid, too overwhelming. She couldn't break the connection. It was as if the ship itself was speaking to her, urging her to understand. Then, with a surge of desperation, she saw a way forward. A command buried deep within the interface. It was a failsafe, a weapon designed to trap the Voidkin once more. But to activate it, she had to risk everything. She had to use the gate as the anchor, the very thing that had allowed the Voidkin to escape in the first place. Ilara, please, Aster cried, his hand on her shoulder, trying to pull her away. But it was too late. She had made her decision. With a final, desperate push, Ilara activated the fail-safe. The entire ship groaned, its energy systems lurching as the gate's golden light flared blindingly bright. The Voidkin howled in agony as their forms began to disintegrate, their shadows collapsing into themselves like a dying star. Then silence. The ship was still, the Voidkin were gone, but Ilara knew it wasn't over. The gate was still there, still pulsing with its ancient energy, and the trial had only just begun. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ilara stood, her hands still on the console, her heart racing. The golden light from the gate flickered and waned, and for a moment, the crew was left in the eerie glow of the ship's dimming lights. The Voidkin were gone, but the air was heavy with the knowledge that they were merely a part of something much larger. Ilara! Aster's voice broke through the stillness, his tone tinged with concern. He stepped cautiously toward her, his gaze flickering to the control panel she had just activated. The hum of the ship was barely audible now. She turned to face him, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and realization. We stopped them for now, but this isn't over. Her voice was soft but resolute. The gate wasn't just a prison for the Voidkin. It was a test, a trial. Test? Aster repeated, looking at her with confusion. What kind of test? We almost didn't make it out of there alive. Ilara shook her head, her mind working furiously to make sense of what had happened. The gate, it's not just a doorway. It's a trial for civilizations, for species that are ready to move beyond their own boundaries. The Voidkin, they were part of that trial too. We were meant to face them, to prove we could survive them. And now it's clear, this wasn't just about us. The gate has been waiting for humanity. She felt it again, the pull of the gate's energy. It wasn't just a portal. It was a threshold, a gateway to something far greater. Beyond the Voidkin, beyond the trials they had faced, something more awaited. The universe itself had been watching, waiting for humanity to unlock its potential. Suddenly, the ship shuddered again, and Ilara's thoughts snapped back to the present. A low rumble reverberated through the structure, and the walls seemed to shift, as though the ship itself was coming alive. A voice, not unlike the one they had heard earlier, echoed through the comm system. Humanity, you have faced the trials of flesh and spirit. But this was only the beginning. You have proven your survival. Now you must prove your worth. The crew stiffened, their weapons instinctively drawn. Aster's voice was tense. What does that mean? What more do you want from us? The voice, distant and resonant, replied, The true test is yet to come. The gate opens to those who are worthy, but to pass beyond, you must sacrifice. Prove your worth not through survival, but through choice. Ilara's stomach twisted. She didn't understand. The gate had opened for them, but now it demanded a choice, a sacrifice. It was as if the universe itself was asking humanity to prove it could rise above its own limitations, beyond the primal urge for survival. Aster stepped forward, his face hard with resolve. We've come this far. If the gate demands a sacrifice, we'll give it. We're not backing down. Ilara glanced at the crew, each of them marked by their own struggles, their own pain. The journey had changed them all. But was it enough? Could they prove humanity's worth in a way that didn't destroy them? As if reading her mind, the voice spoke again. Only one can pass through the gate to the next realm. Choose humanity. Choose who will step forward to claim the future. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the final test, not just survival, not just strength or intellect, but the willingness to sacrifice. The gate was demanding that one of them, one human, be chosen to step beyond, leaving the rest behind. Ilara looked around at her crew, her friends, each of them willing to sacrifice everything. But there could only be one, and she realized, in that moment, the true cost of this journey was not just the battles they had fought, but the choices they would have to make, the ones who would stay and the one who would go. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, her voice unwavering. I'll do it. Aster's eyes widened and the rest of the crew stared at her in shock, but Ilara's mind was made up. It was humanity's future at stake, and it was her turn to take that final step. The gate's light flared once more, and as she walked toward it, a soft whisper in her mind promised, The universe is waiting for you, Ilara Voss. Humanity's future is yours to claim. And with that, Ilara crossed the threshold, the gate closing behind her as the rest of the crew watched, their hearts heavy with the weight of the sacrifice.